Hello there, Ms. Story Mystery here with another collection of creepy tales of mysteries and oddities from around the web. In this episode, I'll be sharing 18 strange and or spooky true stories, including the person who went on a run only to experience strange occurrences and missing time, an ominous spirit hovering over a student working the light booth in the school's theater, and the couple terrorized by a horrifying cryptid in the woods. Sit back, relax, and enjoy these weird and supernatural events as told by yours truly. Back when I was 16, a friend and I were sitting outside a mutual friend's house on the patio, which faces the street, which is well lit up by the way. We were sitting there talking for about 5 minutes. It was probably around 2 in the morning. Then all of a sudden, we both see a black stick figure man run across the street directly under a street light. Once the stick figure got to the grass on the other side, he disappeared right into thin air. We both just sat there for a second trying to figure out what we saw, looked at each other, and not saying a word, got up and run back into the house. 5 years later, we still remember it clearly and talk about it. About 2 Decembers ago, my fiancé was over at my parents' house with me. My parents had gone to a Christmas party, and he was helping me set up the tree and decorate the house. All the stuff is in the attic, and everyone has said the attic had a strange feeling about it. So, we are up in the attic, and he mentions he feels like someone is watching us. I say it's probably just the cat as I hand him boxes. We go downstairs, and we are unpacking the boxes when we heard a series of huge thuds. I say the cat must have knocked something down, but my fiancé points out that my cat is on the couch asleep. It scared me, and I go outside. At that moment, my parents pull up, and my dad yells at me for being outside in the cold without a jacket. My fiancé and I tell my parents we heard something, and we were officially creeped out. My mom and fiancé decide to go to the room where the attic entrance is. Lo and behold, a box that had been sitting far away from the stairs had fallen down the stairs. Then there was the time my fiancé and I were sleeping at my parents' house. We were getting comfy and slowly dozing off. All of a sudden, right in my ear, I hear a demented, creepy voice say, "Sweet dreams," and a cackle. I sit up and grab my fiancé. I asked him if he heard that, and he said, "Heard what?" I tell him I heard a creepy voice in my ear tell me sweet dreams, and he was like, "Oh, I thought you meant that creepy laugh you just did." But no one was in the room with us, and I didn't laugh. When I was 13, I woke up in the middle of the night to a strange man's voice. I couldn't understand what he was saying because he was talking really fast. But at one point I heard it say my brother's name, and then it started laughing maniacally. My dad heard it too, and came running into my room and turned the lights on. No one was there. Absolutely no explanation. Back when I was in high school, I operated the light system for our theater productions. This usually left me upstairs in a room alone that had windows out to the auditorium. One day we were running through the show and one of the teachers that helped out with the program a lot looked up at my window, gave me a strange look for a good while, and then quickly walked away. A bit later, she came up to talk to me, asking if there had been anyone up there with me. There hadn't. From then on, another student was assigned to sit with me in the room. I later found out that she saw the figure of a man leaning over my shoulder and looking out the window. The concept of a ghost in our school definitely wasn't a new one, but it was very unsettling to know he was right next to me. There was this guy I used to work with, called Dan. Dan was a chill guy who everyone got on with, but a little weird at times. He used to believe in a lot of things. Aliens, ghosts, government experiments, the lot. He He wasn't religious, but that's beside the point. Anyway, while messing around at work, he's explaining stupid things to us about how he's seen spaceships and how all this paranormal stuff happens when he's at home. Some of it is quite ridiculous, but I listen anyway. A couple of weeks later, he invites me around for a few beers. I was driving, so I couldn't really drink, but I still went over. We get on the subject of ghosts, and he starts explaining things to me, like how he was once eating an apple and it exploded just as he went to take a bite. I laughed it off and thought it could have just been some sort of pressure with the way he was holding it, causing it to explode. He was deadly serious about this. He pulled out a few pictures of this apple and started showing me the damage it had done to him. There was a picture of him with a cut on his cheek caused by this apple. However, I was still not convinced of this ghost he had in his house. He was not messing around. He said, "Hold on, actually, I'll show you." He pulls out this shoebox full of pictures from around the house. He says, "Just flick through those, you'll see." I sigh and say, "Okay." I'm going through these photos of a recent Christmas, the usual photos, kids opening presents, the family having Christmas dinner, having a few drinks at night, a group shot. I stop. This was the photo that left me in awe. His family was standing in front of this mirror, and I shit you not, in the reflection of the mirror was an Edwardian girl smiling straight at the camera. This was not one of those could be a smudge type of things. It was not a hidden behind someone can barely make it out type of things either. No, this was a clear, colored, taken photograph with the girl's reflection being black and white. You could make out her face, her smile, her clothes, her hands, everything. It doesn't end there, though. Dan says to me, "I told you I wasn't shitting you." I go to the next photo, same sort of thing. Family members have moved around, and so has the girl. She's doing a different pose. She's smiling, showing her teeth. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was this black and white girl standing right in the mirror, smiling at me like she'd been there the whole time. I felt like someone had just thrown a bucket of ice-cold water over me, like I was being watched, like I wasn't welcome anymore, and I felt like I needed to leave. I put the photos back in the box, and not long after, left. I still don't believe in ghosts, aliens, or anything in that matter, but I know what I saw, and I know it scared the shit out of me. About 15 years ago, I sat down on my bed getting ready for the night when I suddenly heard something run on the ceiling just above my head. It continued to run out of my room and straight across the hallway into the next room. I remember it clearly, and to this day, it still gives me sleepless nights. It was around 11 or so at night, and my friend was driving me home. It was all back roads that he had driven hundreds of times. So we're laughing and joking around, and all of a sudden, a giant puddle washes over the hood of the car. Steam is pouring off the engine. My friend freaks out and pulls over. It hadn't rained in a couple days, so we were pretty confused. We get out of the car and check, and the road is bone dry. It was weird. When I was a kid, my brother and I would get stuck with babysitting the neighbor's kid. His name was Alex. Alex was really fond of my Lego set that I had in the corner of my room facing the window. He would play for hours, staying preoccupied while my brother and I would play video games in the living room. So one night when I fell asleep on the couch while babysitting, my brother came to me and said, "Alex is under your bed and shaking." I asked, "What's wrong with him?" My brother told me to follow him into the room and try to talk him back out from under the bed. I go inside to find him on the verge of tears as he was trembling profusely under my bed. I asked Alex, "What's wrong? Why are you under there?" Alex whimpered, "It," while looking at my sliding closet. As I walked toward the bed in order to help him out, he ran. He ran all the way back over to his house and waited on his front steps until his parents got home. Now, my parents were out to dinner with his, and he explained the whole story in detail to both his parents and mine. His explanation sent shivers down my spine when my brother and I left the house to meet up with his parents and find out what happened. My mom told me that Alex was playing with my Legos and heard a slight murmur from my closet, something that resembled a faint vocalization of, "Come here." He said that he looked behind him and noticed the closet had a slight opening with light peering in from my lamp. He stared at the crack until he saw an eyelid open. He told us that there was a man in my closet. Alex then hid under my bed after he gave out a slight yelp, which attracted my brother's attention. My family rushes back into the house and into my room. In horror, we find my closet door rocked open. My window had been left open when it was previously closed, and a few things knocked over which had not been touched previously. We still don't know what force we were reckoning after that evening. Thank God nothing more severe happened. I was alone in my apartment and I decided to take a shower. I locked the door out of habit. It can only be locked and unlocked from the inside. My clean and dirty clothes are thrown on the floor of the bathroom in two separate piles. When I finish taking the shower, my clothes, both dirty and clean, were neatly folded in two separate stacks on the floor. The door was still locked. I take very quick showers. This happened in the span of 5 minutes. I have no explanation, and I get goosebumps just thinking about it. I've often woken up at night because of a woman's voice whispering in my ear. A couple of years ago, I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth at about 2 a.m. when I catch sight of the mirror to my left out of the corner of my eye. In it, there's a woman behind me, staring at me, and she reaches out to touch my shoulder. I screamed and turned around, but there was nothing there. Freaked me out for days, though. I was running on the trails of the Nathan Hale homestead, 18th century farmhouse and property of a Revolutionary War hero in Connecticut, which is only about a 10-minute drive from my grandmother's lake house. I could not find a map of the trails anywhere online, and there didn't seem to be any signage at the place, just a bunch of random mountain bike trails in the woods. I was only going to run 4 miles, so I estimated that I would run for about 30 minutes, using my watch to keep myself on track. So I ran around the trails for a while, and nothing seemed too out of the ordinary. It was about 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, and the only sounds were the distant hums of Route 31, birds chirping, and the occasional squirrel or deer that scampered off whenever I came near. The trail seemed to wind around a lot, and if not for my better-than-average directional skills, humble brag, I could have easily gotten lost. About 20 minutes in, I saw something strange about 50 meters off. A finely polished, light-colored wooden coffin. I was a little weirded out, to say the least, and waited until I got closer for a better look. I rounded a corner where several old tree stumps blocked my view, only to find that the coffin had disappeared. Where it should have been was a clump of ferns. Odd. I turned around shortly thereafter and made my way back to the car. I was maybe half-mile out when I heard a very distinctive knocking on a nearby tree to the rhythm of "Shaving a haircut?" Talk, talk, to talk, talk, except no 2 bits. I was a little spooked out, but chalked it up to be a woodpecker or something. However, not 30 seconds later, there it was on a completely different tree up ahead somewhere. Talk, talk, to talk, talk. I picked up the pace. The trail widened a little, and I could see way ahead the entrance to the parking lot where my car was. There it was again. on a tree seemingly right next to me. Talk, 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 talk. I truly started freaking out and started to book it back to the lot. I was nearing the opening when time seemed to slow down. All of a sudden, it felt like the temperature dropped about 20 degrees. The birds stopped singing, and my simple Timex watch started to malfunction, making all sorts of beeping noises and the numbers glitching on the screen. The beat sounded impossibly loud this time, like it was hacked into every surrounding tree with a hand axe. Talk, talk, to talk, talk. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over me as I anticipated hearing the 2 bits refrain, and perhaps worse. I burst into the parking lot, and everything went back to normal. The temperature was back in the mid-70s, and birds were chirping away. I looked at my watch, only to discover they had gone completely blank. I stood there and stared at it until it flashed 12 o'clock, Monday, 1:01, January 1st. My watch had reset itself. It had never done this before. I got into the car and started the engine. The clock on the radio display read 12 o'clock. That couldn't be right. It should have been around 9:30 or 9:45 at the latest. I put her in reverse and backed up to where I could clearly make my way out to the main road. However, as I was about to throw the car into drive, as it sat there, I heard a sharp rapping sound on the back window, like someone hitting it with their knuckles. Talk, talk. There was no one else in the parking lot when I had finished my run. No cars, no nothing. I didn't dare look back and hightailed it back to my grandmother's house. I have no idea what could have caused this series of events, and still cannot explain it to this day. When I was little, I was terrified of my bed. It was an antique and was literally over 100 years old. I would knock on it and hear knocks back from underneath. One night I woke up under my bed, all the way against the wall. This was a queen-sized bed and stood like 3 feet off the ground, and I was a light sleeper. I don't know how I could have managed to fall off the bed, then slide over to the wall in my sleep. The thing that terrifies me the most is it would have been more plausible if I could roll underneath the bed, but there wasn't enough space under it to do that. I would have had to fall and somehow wiggle or slide over if I wasn't just dragged to the wall. I distinctly remember when I was really young. I was laying in bed one night and started to feel a tug at my blanket. I tried to pull it, and it started pulling harder and harder. Something eventually ripped it clean out of my hands and took it under the bed. I was alone and scared, laying on my bed with no blankets, in the dark, screaming for my mother, and no one came. I curled myself up into my pillowcase and fell asleep. When I woke up in the morning, my blanket was pressed really tight against the corner of the wall underneath my bed. This is 100% true, and I still wonder to this day. I live in a haunted house. I don't mean haunted like Amityville Horror or something, but our house is almost 100 years old, and we do have a ghost. Our first clue was shortly after we moved in, when some money I had laid on my bedside table went missing. Significant other didn't take it, dogs didn't eat it, it hadn't fallen under or behind. It was just gone. I found it several months later when unpacking a box from our apartment. The box was sealed with packing tape, and the money was in the middle of the pile of papers and shit in the box. I know it was the same money because of the order of the bills and the way it was folded, neither of which was usual for me. A co-worker had paid me back for something and done it that way. Second incident was the ceiling fan reversing. Straight up stopped and started turning the other way while I was watching. Not like slowed down either, but stopped dead. Then I saw the ghost one night. My significant other swears I was dreaming, but I know I wasn't. He was hanging a hat on a coat stand in the hallway where we don't have one, and he looked right at me. I could see him clearly. He seemed to sort of glow or be illuminated from a light somewhere nearby, and could describe him to this day down to the fashions he wore, his mustache, his tired but kind eyes. Somehow, I also knew his name, Philip. Since then, he sometimes makes mischief. My dogs seem to see him, and he occasionally has fun playing with their ball, even in the backyard. He makes winds, plays with a fan, has footsteps. If he's annoying or frightening, we usually just say firmly, "Philip, stop." And he does. I don't mind him. I sort of like him, actually. I have looked for records about him, but as best as I can piece together, he rented a room here during the Depression, so there's really nothing with a paper trail. Anyway, that's my best true paranormal story. Went to my boyfriend's house to sleep after working overnight. I'm under the covers to avoid the sunlight that was coming through the blinds. Felt something tugging on my toe and tickling my foot. I laughed and told him to leave me alone so I could sleep. It stopped. I felt a hand grab my butt and I dozed off back to sleep, assuming that he came home early from work and was messing with me as usual. Hours later, I woke up to find that I was alone, so I texted my boyfriend and asked him where did he go. He responds that he's still at work and has been there since 5 a.m. When I was in second grade, I woke up one summer night, dead of night, to a woman floating through my window into my bedroom. Oddly, I wasn't scared. I just sat up and asked, "What are you doing here?" I remember she answered me, but oddly enough, the next morning I couldn't remember what she said or even what her voice sounded like. I couldn't even remember what she looked like. So next I said to her in true 8-year-old fashion, "Well, you better get going because my dad might wake up and then he'll be mad." She slipped out of my already cracked open bedroom door and I went back to sleep. Sounds like sleep paralysis, right? Wrong. The next day, I was really excited that I had my own fairy godmother, and I named her Crystal. And I thought in my head, "Please come back and wake me up at dawn so we can talk." I shit you not. The next morning, just as it was getting light outside, I hear someone whispering my name. I realized that this shit was real, and she was a ghost, and I froze. I stayed as still as I could, not even able to breathe, and just prayed as hard as I could, "Go away, go away, go away." I could feel her right by my head, and as I'm typing this, tears are coming to my eyes. Okay, happened once, coincidence, right? Nope. Every time I would get brave and say out loud to her before going to bed in my room, "Okay, come this time, I swear I won't get scared." She would come, whispering my name, and I would almost shit my pants in fear and never open my eyes. So at this point I'm thinking, still could be night terrors, right? I mean, our eyes have receptors sensitive to light that wake us up, thus causing me to wake up at dawn and hallucinate this shit. Here's where shit gets real. Next summer, I tell a friend that this is going on while we were camping together. She doesn't believe me. Says to me, "Okay, ask her to come tonight." We're sleeping in the same tent, and my friend wants to see for herself. So, I do. And at dawn, I hear her calling my name and my friend's name. We don't move. She leaves, and we both sit up, and my friend heard her too. She freaks out, tells her parents later that day sobbing. I get in trouble for scaring the shit out of kids with ghost stories. Later that summer, I told my cousin this story, and before that night, she freaks out, tells her mom, and I get my ass beat for telling ghost stories. I got pissed about said beating and angrily said out loud, "I got in trouble because of you and I never want to see you ever again." And I haven't. Ever. Thank freaking God. And I just don't think about it anymore. And never when I'm alone at night. When I was about 8, I was sleeping, and I woke up to me being dropped onto my bed by something. I look down the hallway, and I see a ghostly figure walking away. Scared the absolute shit out of me. My dad found me crying and curled up into a ball in my bed. This story was told to Phantoms and Monsters earlier this summer. A homeless couple is camped out in the woods of Norman, Oklahoma. One night, the husband is chased by a large, unknown bipedal cryptid. The wife describes the eerie screech it made to Fortean researcher Lon Strickler in the following account. Okay, it's kind of a long story, but bear with me. I wanted to give a little background to why we were in the predicament we were in at the time. So sometime in the late summer, it was getting close to the fall months, around late September. My spouse and I were going through hard times then, living homeless in the woods of Norman, Oklahoma. The exact location was, I believe, on West Robinson Street, right next to a Crest grocery store. We picked that location because it was conveniently located next to the grocery store for when we could go to get food. There was also hotels nearby when we wanted to shower up and could afford a hotel with what money we had on our paycheck. Legacy Park was across the street, so we could use the bathroom there as well. Anyway, we stayed in those woods for about 2 months before we saved enough money to get a bus ticket out of town. My spouse would hear things at night in our tent before he would come to walk me back from work. It sounded like a woman talking. I thought he might be hearing echoes of voices from walkers across the street at the park or store, but he acted like it was right behind him near our tent. We were pretty far in those woods because at one point we weren't the only people in there. We wanted to be far enough away from the other homeless people to give them privacy and us as well. Plus, we'd had a looter before go through our tent, so we were trying to go unseen more or less. We had been seeing a huge owl that used to sit right above our tent, and in my tribe, the owl is a messenger, and it's usually a sign of death or a bad sign. It would stare straight down at our tent some nights, and just sit there for a really long time. I used to open up the flap of the window in the tent and just see it staring at me. Kind of freaked me out. Then it would fly away, and the sound of its wings was very loud. For a week or so it came almost every night and sat in our tree we were under. Not too long after that was when the scariest night that we had experienced there happened. We always burned all our trash. My husband would burn it a ways from the tent, so we had made a little path. There was other junk there from what people had left behind. Well, he was just getting done burning our trash one night in the junk pile, putting the fire out. There was this huge cedar tree that was behind him, and its limbs up top had started to break as if something was crashing down above his head. It scared him, and he moved out of the way, but there was nothing there that he could see. Right after he heard that and was looking around, something started chasing him out of that area. I had been sitting in the tent around the corner. I suddenly heard running feet go past our tent, and then it stopped. There was nothing behind our tent, though, except thick brush and thorns, and if anything ran in there, it would have got stuck, or we would have heard the leaves crunching. I thought it was my husband. I yelled out to him, kind of laughing, "What are you doing?" But there was no response. Then, immediately after, I see my husband running toward the tent down that path from around the corner where the trash pile was. I got freaked out then because I wondered what just ran on the side of our tent and stopped. It sounded like 2 feet running, like a person running. I tried to explain it away as possibly a raccoon, even though the only animals we'd seen in there was one armadillo, and these footsteps were heavy, like a human or a person running. Anyways, when he got towards the tent, he was yelling at me to hurry and open up the door of the tent. I had never seen him that spooked before. He said something was chasing him just then, and it was big. I asked him what he saw. He said he didn't see anything, but it was dark and he felt it behind him. I seriously, for a minute, thought there was some crazed crackhead running loose in the woods or something, especially when the cops had just been there the month before looking for a suspect that ran in those woods after breaking into the nearby Academy Sports. After we both were in the tent freaking out, we heard a loud, high-pitched sound, and it sounded like it's near the tent. Then, in an instant, it's echoing towards the hotel on the other side of the woods. It sounded as if it was flying away screeching. You could hear tree limbs cracking as it did. It was the strangest experience that's ever happened to me in the woods before, and I have lived in Oklahoma or Kansas most of my life. That sound was like a high screech whistling from low to high. I can't reenact it just as I heard it. Something loud like thunder or a siren of some sorts. It wasn't like any bird I've heard either. I even remember looking at various birds and owls to see if there was some kind of bird that made that sound, to no avail. After this night, we hadn't really experienced anything else. We spent most our money on hotel stays. We were only staying in the tent as little as possible until we moved out of town for good. That's all for today's episode of Miss Story Mysteries, creepy tales of mysteries and oddities from around the web. Please like and subscribe, and if you feel so inclined, please share with your friends and help build my audience as I grow my channel. I hope you'll join me again for the next episode. Until then, take care and stay spooky.